Hi there, I'm Fran Drescher, the founder of the Cancer Schmancer Movement, and you're here watching Corona Care for You, a new series presented by Cancer Schmancer, and we aim to bring you some very interesting outside of the box thinkers from medical doctors all over the world who are interested in looking through a different prism and understanding the body and thinking about different ways that we can help ourselves stay well, live well, and be healthier than we are today. So I'm very proud and happy to introduce you to Dr. Matt Cook. Welcome, Dr. Cook, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, hi, Fran. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Good. So you're up in Silicon Valley right now in California?
Yep. Yeah, we're almost neighbors.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about, and all of our viewers around the world, what is BioReset Medical?
So BioReset Medical is an integrative medicine practice that I've developed, and it incorporates sort of the very best of Western therapies. I'm an anesthesiologist by background, so I've put in 20,000 IVs and done tens of thousands of injections to every nerve in the body almost. And so I incorporated all of that plus Chinese medicine, plus a whole bunch of very provocative and innovative strategies that help reset and build your immune system. And so my concept is kind of like if you have a problem with your computer, you might just turn it all the way off to reboot it and turn it back on. Many of the therapies that I do are an attempt to reset biological systems and get them working better. I think this is a Corona Cares little talk, and I think that we are going to start to have a much more involved and interesting conversation about the immune system. And I think getting the immune system to work is the most important thing that we can do.
Right.
And so, and so
And
this
you
is
notice they're not really talking about that on national broadcasts. It gets me so frustrated because people feel so helpless and hopeless when in fact they could be doing very practical measures right now to improve their health and well-being, and most important, how their immune system functions.
right. Yeah, it's super interesting.
I love the analogy that you made about turning off the computer and rebooting it when it's not working right. Nothing seems to be making the connections. It's not
Right.
moving fast enough. It's not working right. And I think that a lot of people nowadays, especially, can relate to something like that. So, what do we do when, first of all, how do we know it's time for a reboot? And then what do we do to reboot?
Okay, that's a good one. So then the if if your computer, so I'm just going to go. I wasn't going to talk about this, but let's say your computer is having a problem. The reason your computer is having a problem is it's trying to do 18 things. And so there's like 6 or 7 apps that you have running in the background, and your computer's paying attention to those apps. And then you're working on Word, and you've got maybe some video stuff going on. And then there maybe is, if you get tired, there's a game that you're going to play. And so you've got all of that going on, and your computer is constantly refreshing all of that. And what can happen is that becomes too much for it to pay attention to constantly. And then as a result, at some point, it starts to give up because it doesn't have enough cached memory to be able to manage all of that. You can think of the immune system almost exactly the same way. And so, for example, if somebody has very high levels of mold, we'll often find high levels of mold antibodies. And then if they have leaky gut, we will often find antibodies to their intestines, and we'll also often find antibodies to hundreds of different foods because they're allergic to whatever they're eating, because whatever they're eating gets leaked into their bloodstream and they make antibodies. And so then...
Now, do you think, though, that leaky gut and leaking into the bloodstream has also to do with agrochemicals in our food source?
Sure. So anytime you have a problem, so let's say you've got leaky gut and some issues around that. However bad that issue is, it would be worse if you have a whole bunch of glyphosate toxicity compounded on top of that. Okay, for sure. And so then what can happen is, the next thing you know, we've already said a whole bunch of things, which is the equivalent of your immune system having 18 apps all going on, and your immune system's kind of looking around trying to manage all of that. And so then there's a category of people who I think of as almost like mildly immunocompromised, which is people who have all of these things going on. My hypothesis is that those people are higher likelihood to have other big problems. And so as you think about a big problem, one of the classic ones that I deal with a lot is Lyme disease. And so what happens is Lyme is a stealth infection that doesn't affect everybody. So somebody who's healthy gets exposed to Lyme, and it's like nothing happened. And then somebody else gets exposed to Lyme, and it's like they can't get out of bed, and it's a disaster. The person that can't get out of bed usually had leaky gut and immune problems and mold problems and stress problems. So they had all of those things, but they were all barely under wraps. And then they got a big stress, and then they couldn't handle it. Whereas the person that didn't have any of those things, their immune system was not paying attention to those 18 other apps. And so their immune system saw the bacteria and they go, boom. Now, in the same way, I think that is why some people who are in this sort of profile are more susceptible to COVID. So we have some people who are very quote unquote young that seem to have no problems. I predict once we start to dial in, the people that actually, almost all the people who have COVID who get really sick are immunocompromised at some level. And either from this perspective, or they're on a drug that blunts their immune system, as a lot of people with like rheumatoid arthritis.
They're obese.
Exactly.
88% of the people that passed away are considered obese.
Right, yeah. Which is kind of a symptom of something else going on. And so then to answer your question, in my mind, then the approach is a thoughtful conversation. The first thing is a thoughtful conversation to figure out. It's kind of like if I could come down and sit next to you and open up the computer of your health.
Are you single?
Yes. I open up the computer of your health and we look, and then we see, are there 16 apps going on, or 5 or 4 or 3? And then now we can start to address that. And so, for example, if there's food allergies, then we can eliminate those foods. There are certain foods that kind of drive allergic responses. Like for example, corn, wheat, and dairy are kind of classic immune triggers. And so then this is kind of a rational functional medicine approach where we start to ask questions and figure out what's going on, and then build a coherent strategy for reset. That's kind of like 1.0. Now then 2.0 is then all of the things that we do to begin to reset that. Now, if there's somebody out there, one of your listeners could be 1,000 miles away, this is what we call kind of a functional medicine approach to trying to, from a systems perspective, the respiratory system, the gastrointestinal system, the cardiovascular system, start to pay attention. You can go to your doctor, or especially somebody who's trained in functional medicine, and start to get tested. So we can start to test the immune system. We can start to test to see what the vitamin D level is. We can start to test to see, oh, do I have food allergies? Am I susceptible to leaky gut? So then once we build this model, now we have a whole bunch of things that we can kind of work on and we're little engineers now going in and kind of hacking this and hacking that. And then next thing you know, if I can eliminate a whole bunch of stress, all of a sudden things are probably going to start to work better.
And I want our viewers to appreciate that, when you don't go to an integrative doctor like Dr. Cook and you go in with some symptom, they're just going to they're just going to work on that one symptom. They're not going to look at the body as a system. They're not going to look behind the symptom at what is failing you or compromising your immune system. And this is so important in the differentiation, understanding that when you're navigating yourself through the maze of different information out there, because usually whatever you go to the doctor for is kind of the end stage, and there's a whole list of things that are happening before. So listen carefully to what Dr. Cook is saying, because if you're not treating yourself this way, if you're not really looking at everything and starting to eliminate and repair and shut down things that are exhausting your immune system, then you're not going to be prepared for this or any future eventuality. What are your thoughts, Dr. Cook, on like intermittent fasting as giving your immune system a window to not have to, on top of everything else, digest food, so it could start repairing? Do you have an opinion about that?
Okay, so that's a really good one. And I think you're going to love my answer. I hope. So in general, intermittent fasting is totally genius and it's totally great. And so I intermittent fast, and it was funny. I went over to see my friend Shram last night, and then his wife looked at me and smiled, and she goes, "Are you still fasting during the day?" And I go, "Yep."
How many hours do you eat, and how many hours do you let your body repair?
I would say 4 to 5 days a week. I eat in like a 4-hour window.
Wow, that's serious. So for almost 20 hours, like 4 or 5 days a week of each day, you don't eat.
Right, but then within that, I'm super flexible. Like, I'll drink some blended coffee that has a little coconut creamer, Laird Hamilton's coconut creamer. So
Yes.
I'll have that a couple days. I'll have some bone broth, so I will have some of those things. Now, interestingly, this is going to be super helpful for people. Your liver is on the right side of your body. So what happens is, I woke up, I haven't had any food yet today, okay? So then my liver right now is literally making glucose and pumping it into the bloodstream. And so I bet you that if you checked my blood sugar right now, it's probably like 85 or 90. Okay.
And what's a good level?
85 or 90, 85 or 90. You want it to be less than 95. Okay.
So what you're saying is, you don't need as much food as we think we do.
Right. But here's the caveat. And then this is when I tell you this, you're going to be like, oh. So my liver is making sugar. And so I've got this nice steady level of sugar. Now, what can happen for some people is they get inflammation in the gut. That leads to inflammation. The liver is the filter. And so that inflammation goes to the liver, and the liver becomes fatty. When the liver becomes fatty, it's hard for it to make sugar. And so you will have some people, and I had one woman come into my office, and she goes, "I'm a lot better now." But she goes, "Last year, if my husband didn't bring me orange juice in bed, I couldn't get out of bed." Because her liver was so fatty, it couldn't make sugar. And so a lot of people come to me with an interest in intermittent fasting, but they will physically get sick because their blood sugar is tanked and they can't get it up. And so there's some initial periods where you have to reset and start to heal the liver and get that working. Once that starts to work, then you can start to extend the time.
I
So
knew somebody with a fatty liver, and it their diagnosis was because they were trying to be so fat free that the liver started to produce the fat. Is that possible? Did I understand that correctly?
so
And they started introducing like really good healthy oil like flax and things like that into like her salads and stuff, and then she started to get better.
right, and so she may have been. So have you ever heard of essential amino acids?
Yes.
So there are essential amino acids that we can't live without.
Hmm.
It turns out there are essential sugars that we can't live without. Okay. And then let's say I wanted to build a building next door to me. If I don't have steel, I can't make a building. And so there are essential fats that you can't live without. And so she may have been depleted in fats. And so because of that, that created a whole bunch of stress. And then once she got the raw building blocks to be able to start to do what she needs to do, then that got better.
Mm. But that's not always the case. You mentioned like a compromised gut could cause fatty liver, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. There. Well,
So would
there
taking
are. There are.
prebiotics?
Let me say there are many people who have a compromised gut who also have a compromised liver, and it's very multifactorial what's going on between them. It's like they're in a relationship, and so
My dad gets tired a lot. And do you think that I should have them make sure he doesn't have a fatty liver? Is that symptomatic of a fatty liver?
yeah, how what I your dad.
Yeah.
So then what I would do is I would the first thing is to have this kind of long, thoughtful conversation to try to often will hone in what's happening. Like I just saw, I always love what just happened to me. Like I just saw, I was a little late for this call, but I had the consult with this guy who had a 50-year problem. Okay, so the guy in his 70s, a 50-year problem. And then he goes, it's really weird because I went to see a pulmonology doctor. And then he started talking to me about what happened to me when I was 5. And then he
Mm.
started doing all of this stuff. So it's like a great history. And so then it turned out he grew up in the Central Valley and was exposed to tons of glyphosate and stuff like that and infections. And then he had a fungal infection basically his whole life. And they
In
figured
his
it out.
lungs?
Yeah. And so then what happened is now we're getting all of this testing and doing these things, and now we're starting a process to start to dial the immune system in to get it to work better.
Well, he's lucky he finally ended up with you. Do you have an opinion about the vagus nerve and how that impacts um, many things in the body and symptoms that maybe even a regular doctor wouldn't connect with a faulty vagus nerve?
Yeah, so that is probably like my favorite question that anyone in the entire universe could ask me.
Oh, doctor.
So that's kind of hilarious that you asked me that. So this relates, do you know about fight or flight and rest and relax?
Yes.
Okay, so then this
But if
is
there's anything you want to share with our viewers that you think is important to understanding what you're about to say, go ahead and just explain it a little more.
okay. So you'll find this super interesting, and I'll do my best to kind of put this together. So imagine fight or flight is out here, and then rest and relax is inside. Okay, so fight or flight, if the building's on fire, we got to deal with that and get out of the building. But if
Right.
everything is cool and it's just kind of like hanging around the campfire, me and you talking, everything's cool. Okay, so this is rest and relax in the middle and fight or flight out here. And so then that allows us to either turn up kind of the stress or turn down the stress on any situation. So this could be a conversation, but it could be fight or flight, more stressed, or it could be super chilled out, rest and relax. Now, the nerves that control rest and relax are called cranial nerves. And the biggest one and the most important one in the entire body for controlling rest and relax is the vagus nerve. And it comes out of the brain, and then it comes through the neck, and it runs right next to your carotid artery. And then it literally goes and it sends rest and relax information to the heart, to the lungs, and then to the entire digestive system.
Wow.
So they call it the wanderer. It's like Don Quixote. Okay. So it's just wandering around and it goes everywhere. And so it sends a signal that everything's cool and everything's fine. And so then imagine, let's say we were like hunter-gatherers. So then we could go out and we could like be in fight or flight. We'd chase down, and hunt something, and we might get attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, but so we're in fight or flight. We get through it, but then we bring the meat home and we sit down around the campfire, and now we're totally in rest and relax. So the vagus nerve is going to be stimulated and it's going to work and do its thing. So then now that's rest and relax, fight or flight. Very commonly, what can happen is people can get emotionally, psychiatrically, spiritually, socially, culturally stressed, and then they can have a dominant tone of being in fight or flight. And when that happens, we tend to downregulate rest and relax. And so we have too much stimulus going on in fight or flight chronically. And imagine if there was something stressful like COVID, and let's say that's going on today. Okay, well, normally what would happen is there would be some stress that would exist for the news cycle, and then it would go away. So we would have been stressed for a day or two about whatever was happening. But then 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like we can't even remember it. And so now we're back in rest and relax and everything's cool. But when there's something that doesn't go away and it keeps going, and so this is a COVID thing. This is somebody that goes to war and they face the same thing again and again, sexual trauma, emotional trauma, all of those things. Then what happens is the brain goes, oh, you know what? I've got a good idea. It seems like fight or flight is going to be happening tomorrow, so I'm just going to run that so I'm prepared. But when I'm running fight or flight to be prepared, I don't have enough rest and relax nerves going. And so then that leads to a lack of rest and relax electricity that's driving these biological systems like our gut and our intestines and our heart and our lung. So then you could say that literally 100% of everything that I do is intended to have a side effect of calming rest and relax and upregulating vagus, or calming fight or flight, and then upregulating rest and relax.
So what do you recommend to have to be able to have the rest and relax be more in tune with keeping your body healthy? Hi everyone, it's me, Fran Drescher. Well, I hope you enjoyed Corona Care for You, and if you did, please think about making a donation to us at cancerschmancer.org/donate. Like so many nonprofits, we've had to cancel all of our fundraising events, so it's really up to you to help keep us going. We depend on your donations, your support, and your love. There is no donation that's too small, and we are grateful to anything that you feel comfortable giving. And continue to come in to the Cancer Schmancer Corona Care for You series, because we are constantly posting new content, and we hope that it's helpful to you and your family. Don't forget to donate. We really appreciate your support. Thank you.